In the year 1189, the Almohad Caliph Ya'qub al-Mansur embarked on a journey from Marrakesh to fight against the Portuguese. The Portuguese, with the help of a Christian alliance, had taken over Souce, a city that was once under Almohad rule. Ya'qub al-Mansur was successful in recapturing the city of Souce and returned to his capital. Following the victory, an armistice between the Almohads and the Christian kings of Castile and Leon was agreed upon. However, the peace was short-lived. After the truce expired, Alfonso VII of Castile received news that Ya'qub was gravely ill in Marrakesh and that his brother Abu Yahya, the governor of Al-Andalus, had crossed the Mediterranean to declare himself king and take over Marrakesh. In response, Alfonso decided to attack the region of Seville in the year 1194. A formidable army commanded by the Archbishop of Toledo, Martin López de Pisuerga, which included the military order of Calatrava, ransacked the province. Having successfully crushed his brother's ambitions, Ya'qub al-Mansur was left with no choice other than to lead an expedition against the Christians. The Christians were now threatening the northern province of his empire, and he had to take action to defend his land. On the first day of June in the year 1195, Ya'qub arrived at Tarifa. After passing through the province of Seville, the main army of the Almohad dynasty arrived at Cordova on June 30th. The army was reinforced by a few troops that were raised by local governors and a Christian cavalry contingent led by Pedro Fernández de Castro, who had a personal feud against the Castilian king. On July 4th, the leader of the Almohad army, Ya'qub, moved out of Cordova and his army crossed the pass of Muratal. They then advanced through the plain of Salvatierra. A cavalry detachment of the Order of Calatrava, along with some knights from nearby castles, tried to gather information about the strength and direction of the Almohad army. However, they were surrounded by Muslim scouts and almost massacred. Luckily, they managed to provide the Castilian king with valuable information about the Almohad army. The ruler of Castile, Alfonso, had mobilized his troops in Toledo and marched towards Alarcos. Alfonso's primary objective was to block passage to the affluent Tagus Valley. Though aware of reinforcements from Kings Alfonso IX of Leon and Sancho VII of Navarre, he did not wait for them. On July 16, the Almohad army, led by Ya'qub al-Mansur, appeared in sight. However, they did not engage in battle for the next 2 days, allowing their troops to rest. Finally, on Wednesday, July 18, the Almohad army formed around a small hill called La Cabza, situated just 2 bow shots away from Alarcos. Yusuf Ya'qub al-Mansur entrusted his wazir, Abu Yahya ibn Abi Hafs, with leading a powerful vanguard. The first line included the Bani Marin volunteers led by Abu Jalil Mahyu ibn Abi Bakr, along with a large group of archers and the Zenata tribe. Positioned on the hill itself was the wazir, with the amir's banner and his personal guard from the Hintata tribe. To the left were the Arab forces led by Yarmun ibn Riyah, and to the right were the Al-Andalus forces under the popular Sayyid ibn Samadin. Yusuf Ya'qub al-Mansur himself commanded the rearguard, which consisted of the best Almohad forces under Yabir ibn Yusuf, Abd al-Qawi Taliyan, Muhammad ibn Munkafad, Abu Jazir Yajlaf al-Arabi, and the Black Guard of Black Africans. It was a formidable army that Alfonso had greatly underestimated. The Castilian king concentrated most of his heavy cavalry into a compact body of around 8,000 and placed Diego López de Haro, Lord of Vizcaya, in command. The king himself would follow with the infantry and the military orders. As the Christian cavalry charged forward, their formation became somewhat disordered. They collided with the Zenatas and Bani Marin and caused them to disperse. The knights were lured by the Amir's standard, and they charged uphill. During this uphill charge, Wazir Abu Yahya was killed, and the Hintata tribe fell almost to a man trying to protect themselves. The knights then turned to their left and engaged in a fierce struggle against the Al-Andalus forces of Ibn Sanadid. The battle lasted for 3 hours, and by the time afternoon arrived, the intense heat, fatigue, and constant missile attacks had taken their toll on the heavily armored knights. Meanwhile, the Arab right under Yarmun had been enveloping the Castilian flank and rear. At this point, the best of the Almohad forces launched a fierce attack, with the Sultan himself clearly visible in the front ranks. Finally, the knights were almost completely surrounded, and their situation became extremely precarious. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the vast battlefield as Alfonso, the valiant king, led his dwindling forces into the heart of the melee. The clash of swords and the thunderous roar of battle echoed through the air. Alfonso's armor gleamed defiantly as he pressed forward, determined to salvage victory from the chaos. Yet the odds were stacked against him. The enemy closed in from all sides, a relentless tide of adversaries eager to bring down the once mighty Castilian forces. Arrows rained down like a deadly hailstorm, finding their marks with deadly precision. Alfonso fought fiercely, slashing his way through the enemy ranks with a valor that inspired those around him. For a time, the melee raged on, a chaotic dance of steel and blood. However, as the situation grew more dire, his loyal bodyguard, recognizing the peril their leader faced, intervened forcefully. Pulling Alfonso from the thick of the battle, they ushered him away from the chaos and towards the safety of Toledo. Behind them, the Castilian infantry fought valiantly, but was ultimately overwhelmed. The once proud military orders that had stood by their side suffered heavy losses. The Lord of Vizcaya, refusing to succumb to defeat, attempted to carve a path through the encircling enemy forces. However, the relentless onslaught proved too much, forcing him to retreat with a mere fraction of his knights. As the battered remnants of the Castilian forces retreated, they sought refuge in the partially constructed fortress of Alarcos. The castle, though unfinished, became a desperate bastion against the encroaching enemy. Within its walls, some 3,000 souls, half of them women and children, found themselves trapped in the throes of uncertainty. Pedro Fernández de Castro, one of the king's enemies, had played little part in the battle. However, he was sent by the Emir to negotiate the surrender of the besieged castle. López de Haro, the leader of the survivors, was eventually allowed to leave, along with the remaining knights, leaving behind 12 hostages who were held for a hefty ransom. The battle had been a crushing defeat for the Castilian forces, and the aftermath would have far-reaching consequences for the region. The Castilian army was defeated in battle, resulting in the deaths of several notable individuals, including 3 bishops from Avila, Segovia, and Sigüenza. Also among the casualties were Count Ordoño García de Roda and his brothers, Counts Pedro Ruiz de Guzmán and Rodrigo Sánchez, and the Masters of the Order of Santiago, Sancho Fernández de Lemus, and of the Portuguese Order of Saint Benedict, Gonçalo Viegas. The Muslim forces also suffered losses, including the death of the Wazir and Albay Bakr, the commander of the Bani Marin volunteers, who died of his injuries the following year. The aftermath of the battle had a devastating impact on the Kingdom of Castile, causing its stability to be shaken for several years. The neighboring castles of Malagon, Benavent, Calatrava, Caracul, and Torre de Guadalferza either surrendered or were abandoned, leaving the path to Toledo wide open. Despite this, Abu Yusuf Ya'qub al-Mansur decided to return to Seville to recover from his substantial losses, taking on the title of the One Victorious by God. Over the next 2 years, al-Mansur's forces wreaked havoc through Extremadura, the Tagus Valley, La Mancha, and even the area around Toledo. They attacked Montánchez, Trujillo, Plasencia, Talavera, Escalona, and Maqueda, with some of these expeditions being led by the renegade Pedro Fernández de Castro. Despite their efforts, the caliph's forces failed to gain any new territories, and their alliances with King Alfonso IX of Leon and Navarre proved to be temporary. Almohad Caliph Muhammad al-Nasir attempted to build on their earlier success with a new Iberian offensive 16 years later, but he was defeated at the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa, which marked a turning point leading to the end of Moorish rule in the Iberian Peninsula. The Almohad Empire collapsed a few decades later. Although the outcome of the battle was short-lived, it had a significant impact on the region's history.